Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special night of storytelling. I'm Jessica Bliss, storytelling columnist at the Tennessean, and I'm joined by...
I'm Alexus Rhone. I am the producer with Storytellers Project, the national project, and Storytellers Brand Studio, and for I'm an American, this initiative that you are here celebrating tonight. So welcome, and thank you for coming out. Yeah.
We truly, really are thrilled that you guys have chosen to give us your night and your time and to form community in this way. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Listen, I'm especially, this is my first time in Nashville. I wish that I were able to stay longer. I clearly am going to have to come back here and play in this city a bit. There's some rich stuff happening, and I realized that before I even arrived. David Plazas, he's the opinion and engagement editor. I sent him, hey David, I sent David a copy of an op-ed that I wanted to have published to promote the event. It's like no one knew, you know, like the live storytelling event. I know you know about Storytellers Project events that happens here, but this was a special USA Today initiative, and I was like, David, you know, could you help me out a bit? And I sent him this article, and then he published it, and then I waited a few days. And then I began to send the invitations to this event out, and everyone began to respond immediately. And so I knew that this was going to be a pretty hot ticket. I was so excited to see all of the VIPs of the city respond. I was like, yes, if I can't be there, I'll be sending my representative, and all of you VIPs who, you know, I'm so excited for all of the faces that are here tonight, but I was excited even before I got here because you responded so enthusiastically to this night, and I don't believe we're going to disappoint. Thank you for coming out. This is a part of the, I'm again a producer with the National Storytellers Project, which started in 2011 in Phoenix, Arizona, and it was a part of the centennial celebration for the city of Phoenix. But then it grew and became this whole big thing here with USA Today with Gannett, and we're so excited. Now we started in one city 6 years ago. We are now in 20 markets, including, drumroll please, Nashville. Woo-hoo! The Tennessean is so, I read all of the reviews when they come out for all of the customers who come out to buy the tickets to the shows. The reviews are amazing, so y'all are doing just an awesome job. So thank you, Jessica, for all that you're doing.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank a couple of people here tonight. First off, I really want to thank our subscribers. You know, without you all, we would not have the ability to do the community journalism that we deliver in Nashville. It's your support that makes that possible, and we really, really do appreciate you supporting not only this night here tonight, but everything that we do and all the journalist work that we put out in the city every day. So thank you so much. I also really want to thank our storytellers who are all seated up here in the front row and who you will hear tonight. Committing to be a part of this evening is more than just showing up on stage in front of you all. They all committed to sharing their story, to being vulnerable with it, to opening their minds and their hearts to you all tonight. And they practiced it. They gave us many hours of their time. And now they're here to touch your hearts, I hope, as they really have touched ours. And so thank you, all of you, for being a part of this night. It means a lot.
Yes, absolutely. And I also want to thank the Horton building, this beautiful venue that's hosting us tonight. Yes, thank you. I love, love, love this space. Now, I had to get some recommendations from Jessica, and she sent me a lot of really good spaces. And so when I looked on the internet, and it's like, no pictures on the internet can be real tricky. But those pictures on the internet for the Horton building, they did not disappoint. This is absolutely a beautiful facility. Thank you so much, Alexa. I don't know where she's. Oh, there she is over in the corner for everything that she's done to help us facilitate that, to facilitate this night. So a couple of things. I want to set the stage for tonight. How many of you are you love? How many of you are fans of TED Talks? We're my TED Talk fans. Yeah, we love TED Talks, right? Mm-hmm. That is not what we're doing tonight. It's really important. We're not doing TED Talks. We're not doing Toastmasters. We're not going to preach. We're not going to even sell you anything except for a subscription. Where is our contact if you want to buy a subscription?
Devin,
yeah, there, right there. Okay, so that's the only selling.
In the program when you came in. Yeah,
that is the only selling that will happen from the mic tonight. This is a very sacred and safe space. We want you to. Even by the decor, the way we've set up everything, even choosing this particular venue, we want this to feel like a visit with friends where you are simply hearing a story and they are sharing in a safe space, and we're going to understand a lot more about each other at the end of the night. So I don't want you to feel like, oh, well, I thought that this was going to be a lecture of some sort. It's not. It's story, and it's going to be really safe, and I think you're going to have a really, really good time with it. So just wanted to prep you for that.
And to that end, too, some of our stories are going to be extremely polished and professional. Some of them are going to be very casual, and some of them are going to be complicated. Some of them are going to be funny. Some of them are going to make you smile. But some of them might tug at your heartstrings a little bit. And so we ask that you kind of open yourself up to that and be prepared to hear that.
Yes, and again, this is a part of the I'm an American storytelling. It's a part of the I'm an American series, which is a USA Today Network initiative, and it's aimed at celebrating diversity through the stories that bind us together. Now, this program both celebrates and connects stories from a wide range of American voices. The event kicked off last week in Phoenix, where it's the first of 5 summer events. Last week's event was highly well attended. It was a sellout crowd like we have tonight, and it was live streamed as we are doing tonight. So please give our live stream audience a ton of flavor, like laugh and clap raucously. I had sent a few notes out to some folks. I said, hey, bring your rowdy friends so that they'll feel like a really fun night tonight. So I wanted to make you aware of that. So this is being streamed live across the world, across the country, and then also across the world. But it started in Phoenix last week. And tonight is Nashville's night, and then we have 3 more nights, Cincinnati in July and Des Moines and Memphis in August. And all of these nights are accompanying a weekly profile that is in the USA Today network. It's a profile series, and it's going to be run all year by USA Today Network as part of the One Nation brand. And the series is designed to firmly plant USA Today Network's flag in the heartland of America. It's a place where USA Today Network has been and will continue to be. Now, to that end, the I'm an American stories that are featured tonight are true first-person stories. These are not made-up tales. These are places in which the storytellers have been. But what they are meant to do is to demonstrate the spirit of, the formidable spirit of what it means to be an American, how America is great because Americans, shaped by different backgrounds and journeys, are great.
I think Mignon brought her cheer section. I saw her point out to the crowd, so y'all are ready to be rowdy. If you all are interested in knowing more about the I Am an American series, there's all sorts of places you can go. There is actually a website, and we do profiles across the country. We have done a profile here locally, and so that's with Renata Soto from Tennessean Americas. So please check out that one and all of the other stories that we have up on there. The website there is onenation.usatoday.com. And of course, because we are all social media savvy, I want to give you guys an opportunity also to look up the other stories. You can find this on Twitter, of course, Instagram, Facebook. We are all over the place, so just follow One Nation and you can see all of the stories there. All right. So, are you guys ready for some storytelling? I need a little bit more rowdy. Let's try that again. Storytelling! Okay, so first up tonight is a wonderful man, Jared Mollenkof. He is going to talk to you about growing up with American missionary parents in Kenya. You ready, Jared? Bring it on. Let's do it.
My mom and dad met in Chattanooga, Tennessee in the early 1980s. My mom is from Goochland, Virginia. She's a tall black woman. My dad is a short white guy from outside of Philadelphia. And they met at New City Fellowship Church, which is where they ended up getting married and where they baptized their first 4 children. In the summer of 1991, they decided that they were going to take those 4 kids, all under the age of 7, and go to the mission field in Kenya, East Africa. And if you can picture us at the Atlanta airport waiting on our Delta flight, it's my mom and dad, who are already an unusual couple, and then their 4 mixed race kids, and everything that we owned loaded up in 12 large trunks. We ended up getting on that flight to Kenya, and after a short layover in Heathrow, we landed in Nairobi. We packed all of those trunks onto a Land Rover built in the 70s and bought all of our groceries for the next 6 weeks and headed out to the Mwingi district. Now, back in 1991, the Mwingi district was still labeled just the bush on maps, and it was about 120 miles outside of Nairobi, and by my recollection, it took about 4 hours to get out there. And that day, we headed out, and I don't know if it was the roads, and I don't know if it was the Land Rover, but as we pulled in that night, my dad slid off the side of the road. The Land Rover tipped, and I woke up as I was being pulled out of the back of the Land Rover. And I looked in, and my favorite Disney backpack, which I loved very much, was covered in egg yolk. And then I fell back asleep and woke up a second time as a stranger carried me into the house where we were going to live for the next 5 years. And I remember waking up and feeling really safe and really comfortable. And the next day, I remember saying to my older brother, you know, when I get older, I think I'm going to marry Daniel's dad. And my brother looked at me and said, you can't say stuff like that. People are going to think that you're a pervert. And I tucked that away in the back of my head, and I didn't think about the feeling for a long time, and I didn't think about my brother's response for a long time. And we settled into life on the compound. Now, there were only 4 houses on the missionary compound. It was encircled by a large, tall fence and a large gate, and that was up because there were concerns Somali raiders had come onto the compound in the past. And while we were there, when we got there, there were 2 families on the compound. Most of the time that we were there, we were the only kids on the missionary compound. And me and first my 3 siblings and then eventually my 4 siblings all attended school in a very small 1-room schoolhouse on the other side of the mission compound. And in 4th grade, right before my 9th birthday, we were doing a group poetry class at school, which school consisted of me and my 4 siblings and 1 tutor. And as my mom walked me over one morning, and I've got to tell you, when there are 5 kids, everybody jealously guards time with mom, right? So it's just before my birthday, and these are the 5 minutes that day that I get her exclusively. And she handed me a piece of paper with a handwritten note on it. And she said, Jared, I wanted you to have this. My friend Langston wrote it for you. I found out later that my mom was not trying to pull a trick on me. She actually thought that her 9-year-old was smart enough to know that Langston Hughes did not know her and had not written anything for me. But I opened the piece of paper and I read the note inside. It said, my old man is a white old man, and my old mother's black. If ever I curse my white old man, I take my curses back. If ever I curse my black old mother and wish she was in hell, I'm sorry for that evil wish, and now I wish her well. My old man died in a fine big house. My ma died in a shack. I wonder where I'm going to die, being neither white nor black. And I remember my first thought being, I did not know that Dad is rich. And then my second thought being, are my parents sick? What is she trying to tell me? But I cherished that poem, and I put it away in my pocket. And with the faith that only a child can have, I was confident that my mom was really cool, and that she knew Langston Hughes, and that she'd gotten him to write this poem for me. So when I turned 10, we moved back to Chattanooga, Tennessee, where we lived for another 2 years. And I went to Chattanooga Christian School, and started out at school there, one of only 3 black kids in my 5th grade, going to school with a bunch of kids whose accents I did not understand. And I had an experience that I think is kind of ubiquitous for minority kids in school. And when we got to the poetry section in English class that year, suddenly I became the expert on all things black poetry and all things black. And over spring break, we had been assigned to memorize various different poems, and a couple kids memorized Langston Hughes poems. And we got back after spring break, and people recited their poems, and I went up to the teacher and I said, Mrs. Froiler, you'll never believe this, but Langston Hughes wrote a poem for me. And Mrs. Freuler very graciously said, "Oh, honey, that's sweet." And I went back to my seat, and some point later in the day, it started to dawn on me that a Harlem Renaissance poet who died in 1967 did not know my mother. After those 2 years in Chattanooga, we went back to the mission field in South Africa, where we were in Port Elizabeth for 4 years. Came back to Chattanooga, Tennessee again. I ended up going to college at a very small private Christian school on Lookout Mountain, Georgia, Covenant College. And then ended up actually going back to the mission field myself as a missionary for 6 months, and then going to law school in D.C. And my second year of law school, and mind you, at this time, I am still very much in the church. I am going to church 3 times a week on a regular basis. I still to this day have my prayer journals and calendars, and was very involved in men's Bible studies, and was starting to have some internal conflicts. And I had a commute from Capitol Hill, where my law school was, out to Arlington, Virginia, where I lived. And on the Orange Line that I would take, well, on my walk to the Orange Line, there was a little place called Busboys and Poets. And now there are 6 of them all over D.C. But it was a place where folks hung out all the time, and there were lots of poetry readings. And so I heard about this, and I stopped in. And the crowds at these poetry readings were very black and very queer, and they were both categories that I didn't know how to engage with. And I was terrified of the people at these poetry readings because I was scared of all the ways that I was like them, and I was scared of all the ways that I admired them, and all the ways that I knew that I just could not be them. And so I went back to the poetry readings, and I went back to the poetry readings, and I wrestled with this desire to get up and recite a poem at one of these events, and this profound fear of these folks who just seemed so comfortable, and they were drinking alcohol and doing all these things that my family did not do. And so finally one night I decided I was going to get up and I was going to recite a poem. And I wasn't just going to recite any poem. I was going to get up and I was going to recite a poem that let all of these people know about their sin and the problems with them and the things that I thought were wrong. And so I had memorized John Updike's 7 stanzas at Easter. And so I got up and I started out the poem, which starts, "If he rose at all, it was as his body. If the cell's dissolution did not reverse, if the molecules did not reknit, the church will fall." The poem goes on to make an argument for a literal Christ, a literal resurrection, a literal coming again, and punishment for sin. And I got to the end, and this usually very friendly crowd was very quiet, and people did not look at me, and people did not clap. And I went back to my seat, and this beautiful man with long dreadlocks came over to me, and he said, "Isn't it kind of cool that Updike decided to start that poem with an if before he ended with such certainty?" And I've never seen that man again. And I don't think he knows that he rocked my world that night. And I don't think he has any idea what effect that one comment had on me. But I went into that summer, and I got on a plane to Sierra Leone, West Africa, where I was doing work for a government watchdog group. And I started wrestling with that if, and the freedom of that if. And the irony is not lost on me that after leaving one of the most friendly cities to gay people in the world, I went back to a country in Africa where being gay is a crime. And suddenly, for the first time, I held a man's hand in public, and I danced with a man in public, and I embraced that if. And for the first time, that if that was connected to the premise of everything that I had believed for my whole life. Embracing that if allowed me to have the best summer of my life. Thank you.
Oh my God, Jared! Wow. Embracing that if. If that isn't American, I don't know what is. I love Jared. When we were coaching, when I was coaching the story with Jared, as with most of the I'm an American storytellers, they were trying to, some of them would try to force the whole I'm an American theme, and that's not what we're doing. I was like, no, 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 no. By the way you have lived and the things that you have experienced, like this story just fully embodies all of that true American spirit. Give Jared another round of applause. Thank you for sharing that. That was beautiful. Now we'll hear from Getahn Ward, who has a story about the power of information and how it shaped his life. Getahn?
Well, my co-workers at the Tennessean often joke about the length I go sometimes to get people to give me the news scoop, you know. And one of their favorites is me saying, I'm working hard to feed my family, you know, something like that, right? Give me the story. And I guess that's true in a way, coming from maybe one of the worst, poorest country. Grew up in Liberia, West Africa. But the hound dog drive to get the scoop and also to make sure that diverse voices are heard has actually been a part of my DNA for a long time. You know, and growing up in Liberia, the textbooks my mother had on the shelves of our home, the encyclopedias, the newspapers they brought home were some of my best companions. I grew up being an avid reader, you know, loving information. And reading all those kind of transported me into a world beyond the boundaries of where I grew up. You know, I could learn about America and all over the world. And then being able to write first poetry and then short stories and eventually news stories was a way to kind of let out some of that knowledge, you know, like gratitude for all this learning I was getting. And it also was a way to express myself more safely. I remember in high school, maybe liking a girl, right, but being too shy to express myself, right? So I would write a letter, right, and slip it in, you know, saying, okay, at least this is more safe. And then also, not being the most athletic person in my class, whenever we had basketball, I was always one of the last to get off the bench. So I guess I found my passion in the office of the newspaper on campus, you know, writing away. And at times I would be so engrossed in what I was writing that I would probably put off going to the restroom with obvious consequences, right? I won't go there, but but the passion in me. And then so when I was 15, I decided I'm going to walk into a newspaper office and try to write. So without having any formal training, just from reading the papers daily, I just knew how, you know, the form of stories. So I walked into a newspaper called The Standard and asked if I could write for what's the summer break in Liberia. And first they sent me to a soccer match. You know, you're 15, you don't know much. But I quickly proved to them that I could do deeper stuff. So I could cover a graduation. I remember covering a presidential press conference at 15. I was short for my age, and so being in a suit with these grown reporters. I remember once the staff of the newspaper decided they were going to go on strike, right? They were not getting paid. And I actually showed up. I don't know whether I was naive or passionate, but I did, you know, still rewriting while the guys were on strike. And then, but one of the stories I remember most from that first reporting job I had involved a situation where an auditor who worked for the government had called a press conference or two trying to be a whistleblower. An audit had been done of a government corporation, and he was alleging that when the final report came out, there were a lot of things that they found in the audit that was not included in the final report, like allegations of corruptions against certain individuals, right? So for some reason today, I can't remember why, but it seemed like no newspaper in our capital city at the time wanted to touch that story, you know? It was not being told. And so one day while the editor of the paper, who was from Ghana, was out, I went to the publisher, who happened to be an African-American lady who had married a Liberian and gone to Liberia, and she was more running the business side. but she decided we're going to run this story, obviously needing a strong story to carry the paper that day. And so the story actually ran. And the next day I was told the government official whose conflict of interest was a key part of that story, the fact that he was a deputy minister in the finance department of the government, and his private accounting firm was conducting the audit, part of the audit team. And also he also had some conflicts with some relationships on the board of this corporation that was being audited. Shouldn't have been, you know, all these red flags. And so he came to the office very angry, you know, like, who's this reporter? How did this story got written? And so I was told, I went to high school my senior year, and I came back the next day, and the other reporters told me, the publisher kept telling him, he's just a little boy, you know, kind of 15 and going 16 at the time. And a few days later, a fellow who worked for this government official private accounting firm came by the office and shoot the breeze, and he was telling me and some other people, say, you know, you better be careful with this kind of reporting, because, you know, you keep this up, you know, your body could end up in a dish one day, you know. Because we had just come from a military regime, you know, in Liberia, and leaders at that time didn't take too kind critical reporting, you know, on issues of the personality. So that was a awakening movement for me as a journalist, because it showed me the power of the press, you know, the importance of what we do. And I remember once winning an essay contest. We had an essay contest write about the Liberian flag and the significance of its features, and I won $1,000. And most teenagers, 15, 16, will probably have a lot of options for using that money, but I took more than half of that money and invested in starting a newspaper called the Liberian Student Tribune. And the idea was to have a correspondent in all the high schools, you know, contribute stories and kind of inform students about issues that they were not interested in at my age, right? So, and that was a sign of my embrace of the media. And then a few years later, fast forward, war broke out in Liberia in 1989, this Christmas Eve, and everything changed. And it was a very trying time. We had a civil war, full-fledged, going on. It reached the capital city, Monrovia, in May 1990. The University of Liberia, where I was a sophomore, had to shut down. And it was a very tough time. We had hunger, you know, ran out of food. The city was on the siege. We had days when I stayed in the house a lot, and that was mainly because, you know, as maybe 14, 15 years old at the time, children as young as 11, 12 were being drafted to fight, you know, for the rebels or the government, you know. And so being indoors was one way of keeping me safe, you know. And the bravery of my father and God, I think, was the only reason I'm still standing here today. I wonder whether if a lot of young people with great potential, you know, about 250,000 people lost their lives in that war. A lot of people became refugees all over the world. And so sometime after the war had the first ceasefire, and it went on for 14 years, even after I came to the U.S., my parents scribbled their little savings and decided they're going to send me to my uncle in Nashville to continue my education, being that I was very studious, you know, and wasting away. I've been out of school for like a year and a half, nothing going on, you know, fighting and all that around. So I landed in Nashville because my uncle lived here. And I remember one of the first things my uncle told me when I landed here was, he was just telling me, you know, you come from a country where I guess most people around you look like you and so forth. But, you know, this is a country where you can't help but be conscious about race, you know, because it's such a polarizing issue in America. So he was just cautioning me. And he also talked about other things. But then later on, I enrolled at Tennessee State University, which is a historically black school here. And I think it's kind of like I came from one conflict and was dropping to another, you know. I studied economics and finance because I felt like, well, I could always write in my spare time. But later on, I discovered that was my passion in journalism. So I decided to merge business, which was an interest of mine, and journalism, become a business journalist, writing about real estate right now. But one thing I noticed on the campus was the campus newspaper, and I migrated to it and became editor-in-chief, first news editor. And it was a time at TSU of great racial strife, you know. 1993 was the year when, on a quote settlement of a desegregation lawsuit from the mid-'80s, the school was required to become at least 50% Caucasian in terms of undergraduate enrollment. And for a lot of black students on campus, that was like, you know, taking over the school, you know, changing this historically black institution, found out when free slaves couldn't go to mainstream university. And then also the white students on campus felt like, well, we don't have a voice here, right? We can't say anything because we'll be accused of being racist, or, you know, we just here. And so as editor-in-chief of the paper, it was being in the middle of all of that, you know. And so what we did as a staff was, first of all, I wanted to make sure we had a diverse staff, you know. And so I think for the first time, we had one of the most diverse staffs in the school newspaper history. I had at least a Caucasian news editor, production manager, and a features editor. And then we had me from Africa, another person from Jamaica, and a lot of African-American students. So I felt that was important to reflect the diversity of our campus community, you know. And so we had stories explaining this whole order to become more, you know, white or diverse, just to educate students, because there were a lot of perception, for example, like every Caucasian student on campus was on a minority scholarship, getting a free ride, you know. And there were stories we did, for example, that said maybe 1/6 of Caucasian students on campus were paying for their school with a minority grant, you know, as they called it back then. So we felt like it was important for us to get into the issues and not go beyond the passions. And so I remember there were several controversial pieces. There was one where a guy wrote about more tolerance for gays and lesbians on campus, and that struck a lot of discussion. There were other pieces, like a student leader raised the specter of violent confrontation on campus because white people were being forced on us. And another one where so many different issues, stories. And I remember as the editor, we constantly had to explain to the community on campus why we do what we do, that our voice, our role there was to be an independent voice, to be able to allow for expressions of all kinds. And so that was something that got us, you know, respected that year as the campus paper. And we didn't shy away from the issues, but we also didn't try to take one size per se, but allow for free expressions. And so that was a great experience. And then later on, after a few years, years after school, I finally became a U.S. citizen. After struggling with it for a long time, I came up with a family with a lot of pride. Being a Liberian, you know, my mother had come to school in the U.S. in the 70s, went back home, worked in the government for many years. And so I wrestled with this, you know. But after being here for more than half of my life, I realized I was as much of an American now, you know, than as a Liberian, you know. And I also wanted to participate in the electoral process and other things. So I decided to finally become a citizen. And I really cherish the opportunity we have here with protections like the First Amendment. I know it's being challenged on a lot of levels, but that's something I cherish, being an American now. And I also remember one column that I wrote as editor of the campus paper was about, I think it was during Black History Month 1994, and the title was, Who Will Bear the Cat? And this is an old West African story about the rats who live in a community, in a village. And they were constantly being terrorized by this ferocious cat that came every night, right, to grab them and kill them. But they had a meeting, and they were decided that the best way to handle this problem was to find a rope, and as the cat slept one night, maybe have someone put the rope with a bell attached to it around the rope of the neck of the cat. And so whenever the cat was coming at night to harm them, you know, they would hear the bell ring, right? And it would be an alarm. Well, the problem was that was a good solution. Who would bail the cat was the question, right? And nobody was brave enough to be willing to step up and try to handle that task. And I used that in the editorial to make the point that we were faced with so many different problems that, like homicide, you know, and drugs and poverty in America and even the Black American community. But we need to follow examples of people like Dr. King and Rosa Parks and step up, or people who create programs to address issues facing African-American men. And so that was the caution of that. And I ended that column by saying, you know, actions speak louder than words. So let's not just talk, but let's take some action. And I think that's what will make America great, if we can, in this divisive time, look, how can we solve these problems that's going to be here for generations if we don't look at addressing them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You know, as Americans, you know, we think about freedom of speech and freedom of thought and the freedom to make our own decisions and our choices. And the way that we come to value each one of those freedoms is as individual as each one of us are. So thank you so much for sharing that story. Yeah. And so now we have the very lively and very vibrant Miss Mignon Francois. She is a local entrepreneur here, and she's going to talk about career choices that are presented to us and some that we choose on our own. Come on up, Mignon.
I cannot believe how quiet my mother has been tonight. She's usually like, screaming and for everybody and cheering, but I was always obedient, except when I wasn't. Like that time my mother told me to stop pulling that gum in and out of my mouth like that. I lost the gum. She found it later in her brand new orange 1979 Pinto between the seat of her back and her brand new favorite dress. I was punished from gum for so long. I think that's why I have a love affair with gum right now. I mean, I want to pop it. I want to chew it. I want to find out if somebody has gum in their purse right now. I love gum. Or that time when she was trying to switch us from white bread to wheat bread. And she tried to hide mine in a grilled cheese sandwich. Yuck. She was not fooling me. I decided to follow my brother's lead and go over to the picture window where he had convinced my mother that if he looked out the window, it was easier to eat the food. And so I went over there with him, and while looking out the window, I was going to drop the grilled cheese sandwich behind the sofa, and she caught me. But somehow he managed to dump an entire plate of chicken livers back there. I had to eat mine, though. Thank God for the 10-second rule. But when it comes to the things of life that matter, I was obedient. Like, what happens in my mama's house stays in my mama's house. And you better not bring C's up in this house unless it's vitamins. Or you can be whatever you want to be as long as it's a doctor, a lawyer, or a teacher when you grow up. And me, I was ambitious. I was going to be a doctor. So much so that I did it all. Summer camps at Xavier University every single year. BioStar the summer before my 10th grade year for biology, and then ChemStar the summer before my 11th grade year for chemistry. And all these things prepare to make you shine. When I entered Xavier University as a freshman in the fall after my 17th birthday. But no matter how much I tried to apply the science, no pre-med, pre-college, pre-science preparation course could prepare me for what high school didn't offer me. And so when I got to college, I realized that I loved French. And I had that I could do. So I was going to be a translator. But my mother decided that there was no future in my French. And she decided that I should focus. I was obedient. I focused on the parties. But I didn't even get that right. One epic party too many, and I was bringing home a baby bumblebee. And 18 and pregnant, social services was not the reality I had planned for my life. So I decided that I would go to a different university and change my major to nursing because I felt like that was the best opportunity to provide for just the two of us. And when I got there, I met this guy at orientation, and he was stalking me around campus for a couple of weeks. And I told my mom about this guy who I thought liked me at school, and I said, there's this guy that likes me at school. I think he's really old, though. He's at least 29. He was 31, and he had 3 children. And I was 19, and I had a baby of my own. And 4 weeks later, we were engaged. And 3 months later, we were married. And 4 kids, 20 years old, and a husband, we did not waste time expanding our family and moving them to a new country, Texas. And with baby number 5 on the way, it was getting hard to provide for this young family. And just the investment of a car to carry 7 people around at that time was something that we couldn't fathom. And so I needed my education. I mean, because clearly I needed a Lincoln Navigator or a Ford Excursion, you know, with the diamond in the back, sunroof top, digging the scene with the gangster lean. Ooh. Y'all know. Because at 21, I wasn't driving a mom van. I mean, at 42, I'm not driving a mom van. And so I decided I need to go get my education. So I went down to Houston Baptist University, a little small Christian university. I figured I could be awesome here because I knew this environment. And standing in front of the president's office there, I was faced with the fact that being a doctor or a lawyer wasn't in my time frame, but that I could be a teacher, but that was a path I really didn't understand. And at 21 and 5 months pregnant with baby number 5, I felt like I had wasted my life, that I hadn't done any of the things that I had promised my mom that I was going to do or be. And I reflected back on my 11th grade teacher who had put a fire on the inside of me a long time ago, Dr. David Boudreaux. He came to my school mid-year, my 11th grade year in 1991, during the teacher strike that was threatening our education, and he was going to do something about it. And he decided on the first day of him being my 11th grade English teacher that he would kill 2 birds with 1 stone. He was going to get to know his students as well as figure out their skill level for writing by issuing us an assignment to write a 1-page introductory paper. Well, my life was too boring to write about, so I made my paper a canvas of lies. I wrote for him the tale of how I became a teenage mother, which at that time I wasn't yet, of what it was like to live in the projects, which I knew nothing about, and how I wanted to escape my life for normalcy just for one day, which could be further from the truth. And a very concerned Dr. Boudreaux came and approached me with all the programs and services that they had for me and how he was going to make sure I got them. And I was like, oh, yeah, that was a lie. And he said, what is it that you want to be when you grow up? I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to heal and help the world. He said, but you're a writer. No, I'm pretty sure I'm a doctor. And he introduced to me a word I had never heard before, journalism. That journalists were writers that penned newspapers and magazines. That they could be reporters who sat behind the evening news desk and anchored the news. And that made me feel excited on the inside because it spoke to the fact that one day I could be famous. That God didn't waste this fabulous name on nobody knowing it. And that I had a job to do, and that was to become memorable. So standing in front of the president's office with the paper application in my hand, I decided that I would declare a major. But I was nervous because even though she was hundreds of miles away, I could hear my mother. And I was afraid. And I was a mother and a wife. And I was worried about what my mother would say, not thinking that she might be excited that her baby was going back to college for anything. And so I wrote it down, mass media. That's what I'm going to do. And in 18 months, I chewed up that 4-year program and graduated with distinction in an area that I could apply myself to. But no matter how much I applied for jobs, the only one I could land was household manager. That's mommy and wife. And the times began to be very hard. We struggled for many years. And so we decided that we would move to Atlanta, where we had family who could help us. And the more we applied ourselves, the more we were met with the same thing, more struggle. Until one day, I landed a job in my field. And I was working for about a year in corporate communications when it happened to me. I was pregnant. Again. Like, I didn't know how this thing worked. So here we were, babies, daycare, aftercare for kids. It's expensive on a one-income family. We were living insane, doing the same thing and expecting a different result. I had an idea. We would do what we did before. We get up and we move to another city. But this time, it would be a little different. My husband, who had been providing for us as an entrepreneur, would get a job, a 9-to-5. And that 9-to-5 brought us to Nashville, where we were going to move our children into a neighborhood. But as soon as we got to Nashville, that job fell through. And so did the hopes of providing our children with a home where when they hit the light switch, lights come on and water that comes out of faucets on command. Because when your money is unsure, these things are hard to come by. And looking very gray and possibly near death, I needed to do something to help my family make ends meet. And with no knowledge of the business and no ability to bake, not even out of the box, I had this idea that I could make cupcakes. And I could have a bake sale every single day. I mean, I had businesses before, like my custom wedding veil business in 1996, and my baby book business of 1993, and my wedding photography business. I mean, I had a degree now. In 1999, I had business ideas, but this time I was going to follow it all the way through because my children were watching. And I wanted to show them what they could do if they applied themselves. And though I couldn't apply that science to the human body that I had learned in that pre-med education, I was able to apply it to food. And I created for myself an award-winning recipe for success, making cupcakes every single day and having that bake sale. I did it this time. I followed the path forged for me by circumstance. It took me 25 years to figure it out. That my purpose in this world was to live the most abundantly me as I could be. That I could heal the world and bring them joy. And though I thought I would do it as a doctor, a lawyer, or a teacher, I would do it as a baker, a mother of 6, and a serial entrepreneur. Now in my spare time, I give my time away, teaching other people how they too can use entrepreneurship to follow their dreams and find financial peace and healing and joy with what they were created for. I also give for them a map that they can use to start their business and all the places that they need to find in order just to begin. And teaching them how they can be abundantly them as much as possible. So I guess you can say that I did it. I was obedient. I did become a doctor, a lawyer, and a teacher. Yep, that's me, Dr. Mommy Esquire. Thank you.
I tell you, entrepreneurship is absolutely at the heart of what it means to be an American, and I am so inspired by Mignon. And she talked about creating happiness. There's a whole table full of happiness that's over there. We have some cupcakes from the cupcake collection. So yes, so after the show, go and nosh. So thank you so much. Give her another round of applause. Our next storyteller is Mohamed-Shukri Hassan, and Mohamed is going to tell us a story about his experiences advocating for new Americans. Please welcome Mohamed.
I was born in central Somalia in the late 80s and early 90s. Civil war broke out. And I remember I was 2 or 3 year old, I think, that child. And everybody runs away for their lives. So we fled with a car from our town. The few days we ran out of gas, so there's a lot of fight, people dying, so we started walking. And I vividly remember on the back of my mom, the 4 older sisters and me, we keep going, and these thousands of people running, fleeing for their lives with their family. And when we come closer to Kenyan border, Kenya-Somalia border, there's a lot of, there's hunger. People haven't had anything for days. They've been running away. So you see senior citizens living, you're a child in the back, so you look around, senior citizens being left behind. Sometimes as we walk, we literally walk by like dead people. So we get into Kenya, and there's a refugee camp that get contained. And in that refugee camp, all the families that make it there just try to scrap and make whatever the most of their life and, engage in survival. And as a child, you're carefree, you run around. So I spent my entire boyhood as a refugee in that camp. And how days pass by and all that is that the UN food is provided by UN, sometimes run out, so we get a couple kilos of rice, oil and stuff, and that's what we survive on. And as little boys in the neighborhood, we sometimes create our own happiness. So those grocery stores from Kroger, we made soccer ball out of that, and we play that and pass the whole day by that. That's kind of our experience. And then in this refugee camp, everybody dream of getting out. And just about everybody in that refugee camp want to come to America, because America is a country where you won't be, is a freedom country. There's that sense of, freedom that's associated with America. So if your family didn't come to America, everybody apply for this lottery. And currently there's almost 160 million refugees around the world on the move. And in that lottery, only 1% of that get lucky to get out. So a lot of that lottery, a lot of families win, and everybody wanna win the American lottery, but a lot of families get lucky with Sweden and Canada. And so as time passed by, year after year, it's very, tedious process. You got some friends end up in Canada, some of your friends end up in London, New Zealand, and you're still here. In 1997, our family got lucky. So my mom won the lottery, and she came to Atlanta by herself and petitioned for us. Came to Atlanta. I was 13, turning 14. And life is hard. I don't know much English, so I'll get enrolled in 8th grade. Get put in this program called English as Second Language. So the way I learn English is getting up every morning, 5 in the morning, and watch Saved by the Bell. And there's so many shows, and in the evening, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, My four sisters love The Passion and The Bold and the Beautiful. So we watch tons of TV and complement with that, and that's I kind of learn the language. And life is hard. So my mom worked full time to support us in Georgia. So she worked at the warehouse, packing jeans and all that for Marshall. And when I was in 11th grade, 12th grade in high school, we kept hearing that, Tennessee has a lot of jobs. So in refugees and immigrant community, we look for those opportunities. So Tennessee has jobs, and jobs are not very far because Atlanta has a huge traffic. You drive 45 minutes or an hour to job. So we decided to move here in December of 2006. And I was 18 then, just about to graduate from high school, and I didn't know what to do with my life. I'm the oldest son in my family. My sisters are married, and I really wanted to help and support my mom. So few weeks in Nashville, I got my first job at Pizza Hut on West End, washing dishes and doing everything that they want me to do. And few weeks passed by. I wanted to really support mom and really improve my life. And somebody told me that you get a high school degree. The only way you can do better is go to school. So I enrolled in classes at TSU and keep working. And I complained to a friend of mine and tell him, hey, this pizza job is, and also we are Muslim, so my mom kept complaining that I cook pork, so that gets on my nerves. So I talked to a friend of mine, and he's like, yeah, do security job. So I got me a job as security guard. So I worked 12-hour days on weekends and kept my pizza job at night, and then started going to school. And one of the building that at security, there's an organization that's housed there. This is late 2000, around 2008. And every day, my job is to patrol, make sure that nobody's breaking into a car, and make sure that everything is going. But folks that look like me, immigrant folks, keep coming out of this building. And I'm a very curious person. A lot of you guys might see me around Nashville. Sometimes I just want to get up and, drop what I'm doing and show up to things. And because life is all about showing up. So I got curious, and I asked somebody, what goes on here? What are you guys doing here? And they told me that there's a guy named Steve Fotopoulos. He was the executive director of the place. So he was standing outside, and he told me, we do this, and we do this, and we help immigrants. We empower them. Everything he said kind of resonated with me. And I'm here, college freshman. So every day I'm off, I started volunteering there. My security job is that building, but I just started going there, and they give me stuff to do. And by the time I graduated from college, that very same organization, because I dedicated a lot of volunteer time there and learned a lot, I become the Welcome in Tennessee director. So my job now is travel across the state of Tennessee and explain to people how Tennessee is more welcoming and how we are better off if they welcome more awesome people like me and my family. So my job consists of going to Memphis, talking to the mayor there, next time talking to Rotary group, Chamber of Commerce group, and some days church groups, just all of it. It's just a lot of presentation. And one thing happened along that line is that, being immigrant, first generation immigrant, we share experience. So there was a family, a Latino family got raided, and we are organizing an event. And a friend of mine named Alex, he's Mexican-American. We get in the car. We wanted to go and support that event. And my car was low on gas, so I pulled into a gas station. This is all South Nashville, all Hickory area. And I was I was in the gas station paying for, and I asked Alex to pump the gas. And by the time I come back, there's a bread pickup truck. The middle-aged white guy came out of it, and he was lashing out at Alex, saying, go back to where you come from. Y'all taking over. I went to McDonald's this morning. It's all full of Mexicans and all that. But the issue is that Alex was from Memphis. He was born in Memphis. He might be Mexican, right? So I had a lot of experiences like that. And my second most interesting experience is that kinds of like this event is titled "I'm an American," so I feel like I'm working hard in adding my story and kind of values to the larger American story. So I'm proud American, but I'm kind of also in this box of have this unique lens where I'm triple minority, right? I'm black in America, I'm first generation immigrant, I'm also Muslim. So out in Coffee County, a county commissioner had a big guns and all that. Here in Tennessee, they love guns and a lot of stuff. So here he's an old government official. He had a gun pointing and say, "This is how you wink at a Muslim." And as activists, we raised some concern. And the mayor of that town invited us and say, "Let's have this event discourse and give my folks, presentation. This won't happen again." So we thought it's something civil, nice there like this that happened. So we went there, like over 1,000 people outside protesting. Folks were armed, yelling, and we went in there, and I was just taken back because we live Nashville with only 6 people. And we thought that we're going to come to an event like this and have a good conversation. And it kind of messed up with my mind because these people are armed and the stuff they're saying that, yeah, y'all talking over, Obama brought all of you guys here to America, so like my friend Rashid, who was there with me that day, he's literally born in Nashville. He's 40-something years old and he's been here. So that event was very it has taken me back on, the whole American experience that we have to really always do a lot of work. But during my Welcoming Initiative work, when I used to direct that initiative, is one of the most kind of touching and bright spot is an experience I had in Signal Mountain, Chattanooga. That's out in the rural Tennessee in the mountains. A Presbyterian church. So I came there to do a welcoming presentation, and they opened their door just in the church basement. Folks that never even met an immigrant. And my presentation that day was, we took our presentations about, the idea of communities of faith is usually the teaching of Jesus that's welcoming the stranger and being kind. And folks there at the end of that presentation were asking, how can we help better? Can we come all the way to Nashville? And so we as Americans, we have so many stripes. So my human experience, and one time I get a lot of my energy from people so that I show up to a lot of events, is that the one thing that event taught me is that we as humans are inherently good as Americans, but there's a lot of misinformation. And today, in America, we're having this big moment. But as a former refugee, and Getahn also earlier mentioned that every refugee camp in the refugee camp right now, if you go to Paris, go to Greece, Syria, Kenya, any place, and ask them, where do you want to go when you get out of this camp? They'll say America, because the reason of that is because of the freedom and that the belief that America is a place when you come, you are not defined by what you used to be or where you come from, but what you add and what you create. And that idea right now is kind of in a question because we're building walls, so no more refugees, no more immigrants, right? So what kind of America do we want right now at this moment? So that's kind of my story, and I would like to end it that.
Thank you so much, Mohamed. Thank you very much. Mohamed is one of 37 million immigrants in America right now, and his story really helps us kind of understand how rich and complex our ongoing relationship with immigration is. So we really appreciate you sharing that story today. Thank you so much. And now I would like to introduce our final speaker. This is Robin Patty, and she is a former Green Beret who will talk a little bit about adjustments and transitions. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you. I grew up in Blacksburg, Virginia, and I had a pretty normal childhood. My dad was a math professor at Virginia Tech, and I had a stay-at-home mom. And as a little boy, I played with the usual things. I had toy guns and G.I. Joes and played Cowboys, Indians, and Army and all of the things that any little boy would do. Well, that was the side of me that everyone saw. The side that no one saw was me sneaking into my mom's closet and doing what my sister did openly, which was trying on half of everything that mom owned and blaming it on my sister. But, let's see. And I've completely lost my train of thought. So as I grew older, in middle school, my parents went through a divorce, and at 14 years of age, my dad remarried. I was living with my dad, and I now had a stepsister that was about the same size as me and a year older, which was awesome. I had all sorts of clothes to try on. And she was pretty messy, so she never knew if I tried out anything or not. So about that same time, I also joined Civil Air Patrol with dreams of being a fighter pilot. Well, a year later, I started having to wear glasses, and that was the end of that. But I stayed in Civil Air Patrol for a couple of years, and then at 17, I joined the National Guard. My summer job between my junior and senior year was basic training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and then the infantry school after I graduated in 1980. That was at Fort Benning, Georgia. Well, at 21, I decided to go on active duty, and I went straight to airborne school at Fort Benning. Then my first assignment, the 82nd Airborne at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and a month later to Grenada, a little island that we wound up invading in 1983. Well, when I went to the 82nd Airborne, I no longer had any privacy. I lived in the barracks, and we had 2-man rooms and 2 latrines per floor for about 30 or 40 people. So I completely gave up cross-dressing. That, there was just no way that I was going to get away with this. So fast forward a few years, and I'm 26 years old. I volunteered for Special Forces training. Again, that's at Fort Bragg also. I was accepted into it. And after a year of being in training, I was awarded my Special Forces tab, donned my Green Beret, and went off to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where I was assigned to the 5th Special Forces Group. Well, now I had a private room, even though I still lived in the barracks, and I had my own latrine, but I was still a little leery about getting caught. And even though it had been about 6 years at this point since I had cross-dressed, I started shopping for clothes through catalogs, of course, and started amassing a wardrobe, and I would keep it off post in a storage building. And when I wasn't deployed to the Middle East or in school somewhere, I would take occasion and go get some clothes, go a couple of towns over, get a motel room, and spend the evening dressed as a woman, living as a woman, but only within the confines of a motel. Well, this was going well until I was 31, and on November the 14th, 1992, my world came to a crashing halt. We were on a night training exercise, and early one evening, 4 of us got in the back of a C-130, took off, climbed up to altitude. The Air Force opened up the back of it, and the 4 of us stepped to the edge of the ramp, oxygen mask on our face, weapons at our sides, 100-plus pounds of gear strapped to us, and jumped off into the middle of a very cold, very dark night. Our spot was off, and 3 of the 4 people, myself being one of the 3, wound up going through trees. I've gone through trees before. You get banged up a little bit. The other 2 guys got lucky, got the usual scratches and scrapes and bruises. I unfortunately broke my back in 3 places, broke several ribs, my right hip, suffered a number of other injuries, and spent a month at Vanderbilt in ICU, and then 5 months in rehab at the VA in Memphis, which is a spinal cord unit. Well, while I was there, I met this woman that was a nurse, and we started dating. And I went from rehab to living with her, and then a year later got married and moved to Murfreesboro, right outside of Nashville. A year and a half later, we got divorced. And then at 41, I got married again. A year and a half later, got divorced again. Don't worry, that's it, 2 divorces. And up to this point, I had given up cross-dressing completely from the time that I was hurt to the present. Well, in my mid-40s, I met a woman that lived in Chattanooga. And we started dating, and I would spend a weekend down there, and then a weekend up here. Well, one weekend, I was down at her place, and she thought that it would be really cute to dress me up in her clothes. I'm like, sure. Like, I'm going to object to this. Okay. So long story short, by the end of the weekend, we had gone and done some shopping, and I now had the beginning of a new wardrobe that I kept at my house, and occasionally I would take it with me when I went down there, or I would cross-dress down there or up here, but it was always within the confines of a house. Well, in 2009, I was 47, and I had found a thing called the Southern Comfort Convention, and no, it has nothing to do with whiskey. But it's the largest convention for the transgender community. It, at the time, was in Atlanta, and we went down there to that, and it was huge. There were about 1,000 people there, everything from cross-dressers to post-operative transsexuals, vendors everywhere, seminars on everything from how to wear makeup to doctors giving seminars on such things as gender reassignment surgery. Well, I met another woman down there named Susie, who from Australia, and we were talking, and she said, do you know what the difference between a cross-dresser and a transsexual is? I'm like, I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, of course I know this, and I know you know this. And she's smiling, and finally she said, about 2 years. Well, it took me a little longer. So then, eventually the woman that I was dating in Chattanooga, we broke up. It had nothing to do with my cross-dressing. She really enjoyed that side of me, which is very rare. But we're still friends. She's still very supportive of me. And at 51, I decided I had to see a therapist because something was really wrong. I was living 2 sides of the same coin and not getting anywhere with either one of them. Well, a year and a half later, I decided I was definitely going to transition. I came out to my family, which actually went better than I thought. It ranged from my dad that was like, this is really weird, and he didn't really want to talk about it, to my sister that was, oh, well, cool, I have a sister. Then I came out to all of my friends, and to my surprise, even though I run in conservative circles, and my voice is going, I managed to keep most of them. I unfortunately lost one friend that I was close to that had taught me how to hunt, and I didn't take up deer hunting until after I was a paraplegic. We would shoot a lot, have breakfast or lunch, and talk about shooting and hunting and just whatever was in the news. Well, when I came out as a transsexual, that was it. He wanted nothing to do with me from then on. So at 53, I started living full-time as a female, and I had changed my name a few days prior legally. So I now went by Robin. Previously I'd been Robert. It was pretty close, so I got to keep at least the right initial. At that time, they had just come out with a new DSM, which is a manual that the psychological and psychiatric community uses. And it used to be it was mandatory that you had to live full-time 1 year before you could have gender surgery, and now it's a guideline, and most surgeons pretty much follow it. But 6 months later, I went up to New Hope, Pennsylvania to have facial surgery to take away some of the male features from my face. And the doctor that performed the surgery is also a transsexual and was a Navy flight surgeon. So we had a lot in common. Well, my sister went up with me and stayed for a couple of weeks while I recovered, and then I went back home to Tennessee. And then for my 54th birthday, I gave myself a present that most people think is a little weird, which is more surgery. And 5 days before my 54th birthday, I had gender surgery and a breast augmentation done. My sister went up with me and my brother-in-law this time and stayed for about 2 weeks while I recovered from that, and then went home to Tennessee. But a funny story about the night before I had surgery, my dad, I talked to everybody in my family the night before, and my dad, who had been so, I don't want to talk about this, he grew up on a little farm in Georgia, and he was joking around with me, and he said, we used to do this to hogs, I could do it free. I'm like, no. So now it's been almost 3 years now. I'm living my life on my own terms. I'm still the same person on the inside, though. I still enjoy shooting and getting dirty, and I have a few new things I enjoy a great deal, like fashion and makeup. But now some of my hobbies still stay the same, though. One of the great things is that now my body is aligned with my mind. And when I look in the mirror, for the first time I see myself as I've always imagined. And for decades prior, when I looked in a mirror, I saw a stranger.
Thank you so much, Robin. Robin, you can stay up here. I'd like to welcome all of our storytellers to come back up on stage with us. Come on back up here. Thank you all so much for opening your hearts, sharing your stories. Look at that. Standing ovation. Thank you guys so much for being here. That's pretty incredible. You guys were amazing. Thank you again to our wonderful audience. You guys were great. If you enjoyed your experience tonight, and I really, really hope you did, I want you to know that the Nashville Storytellers Project is alive and well, and we will have 2 more events even just this year. We have one upcoming on August 28th, and that will be about family beginnings, and we're looking about families starting in the untraditional way. So if you talk about adoption and surrogacy and, a community formed with recovery or immigrants who leave their families behind and have to form new communities here. We'll look at all the different ways families are formed. And then in November, we're going to have a special night dedicated to our veterans, and we're going to tell stories of being in service and all of the hardship and everything that they go through to serve us and to keep us safe. So again, thank you so much. Thank you to our amazing storytellers. Thank you to Alexus for helping make this night possible. And thank you to all of you. You guys were great. Thank you. Have a good night.